In every museum that displays the dead, there is at least one body that refuses to become an artifact. She is not called by her true name. That name was buried with sand and time. She is called by the only thing that still lives on her skull after 2,000 years, the woman with the hair. Her body was uncovered in a desert city. I will not repeat its real name. Not because the law forbids it, but because those who once worked that site have stopped saying the name aloud since the last night they camped beside the opened vault. From now on, I will call that city Ras Ammar, and the temple complex where she was dug up, H13, a crumbling earthen pyramid, standing alone like a frozen wave in an ocean of dust. According to official records, she was high-born. Some labels dare to say, princess. Unofficially, among those who lifted her out, stamped numbers on her ribs, logged her wrappings, she was called something else. The one buried alive. What made archaeologists lower their eyes was her hair, a black river spilling down her shoulders, intact, unrotted, unbroken. This story, the one you are about to hear, began as a normal excavation, written in budgets and field notes, and then continued beyond what was ever allowed to be written down. I don't tell this to frighten. I tell it to remind you. What was buried is not behind us. It is beneath us. The man no museum ever credits, the excavation lead of H13, here called Marlon Reyes. 61 years old, widowed twice, 10 desert digs, 3 war zones. Marlon was not a romantic. He did not come to the dust for mythology. He came because he understood how stone treats memory. It preserves without mercy. The decision to open Chamber C deep was his. He signed the order, broke the plaster, stood closest when the shroud was lifted. Archaeology to him was a polite form of slow violence, arguing with the dead using brushes instead of bullets. He was therefore the first living pair of eyes to see hair that had refused to decay for 2,000 years. They photographed, they coded, they stapled cold numbers onto warm horror. By midnight they zipped their tents shut and slept on the very sand that once served as her coffin lid. That was the last night anyone at H13 truly slept. It began like a bodily failure, not a haunting. 0237, bed number 4, Ortiz, soil chemist, no seizure history, jolted upright with a strangled gasp, both hands clawing his throat as if the air had turned solid. No sandstorm, no irritant, pulse spiking, lips going blue. By the time Marlon fitted the tongue guard, Ortiz's eyes were rolled white, consciousness gone somewhere else. They injected, they held his head, they counted. At the same moment, Carmen Bell, the technician on duty, looked toward Chamber C deep. Her mouth opened but made no sound. Later she said she did not see a ghost. That word is too gentle. She said she saw a living woman kneeling in the burial pit, her back turned, her chest still rising under the cloth. The posture was not ceremonial. It was the stance of someone bound and waiting for earth. Carmen blinked. The image cut out like a frame torn from a reel. They reported the seizure. They did not report the woman. When the convulsions stopped, Ortiz's breath returned in torn fragments. His pupils were blown, like someone who had just looked into a bottomless shaft. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask where he was. The first words he spoke, like taking dictation, were, "Don't bury her again." No one had told Ortiz what Carmen saw. No one had mentioned a woman. Marlon wrote 3 words, RESPFAILURE, STABILIZED. No quote, no timestamp, no pit. When they descended into sea deep, Marlin froze at the fourth step. The right wall bore 4 deep gouges, as if fingernails had dragged upward when the earth was still wet. No collapse, no tool marks, no animal trace. What frightened them was not that the gouges existed, but their direction. They didn't blast outward to escape. They climbed straight up, the motion of someone suffocating and held down. Above ground, no one spoke of dreams, but everyone admitted one identical fact. None of them dreamt of screaming. They dreamt of swallowing a scream when screaming wasn't allowed. They did not confess that with words. They confessed it by avoiding each other's eyes. 9:12. The order from the capital: pack and transfer the body within 72 hours. Marlin folded the page and slid it under the logbook. Officially, he cited missing stratigraphic mapping. Unofficially, what rose in him belonged to battlefield instinct. He did not fear the mummy being moved. He feared what might be unsealed if they moved her. We are not yet allowed to take her out of this ground. Not the law, not the data, but the sense that something under the sand still held claim. No wind, canvas sagged like lungs under arrest. 2:11. Ortiz sat up again. No seizure, no oxygen loss. As if answering an old command, Marlene touched his shoulder. Warm, steady. Whatever held him was not medical. Ortiz spoke, eyes unowned. They are not allowed to take her a second time. A second time. That line implied a previous escape, in a century where no one lived to remember. Right after he spoke, from sea deep came a blunt, concussive knock, climbing the ladder like a fist on the underside of a coffin. Once, then again, then a third time, slower, as if whoever struck now understood they were being heard. No one moved toward the shaft. No one rose. No one spoke. The shaft gaped in the dark like a mouth that had just proven it still had a throat. What followed was not panic. Panic has motion. This was something worse, a stillness that behaves like obedience. Carmen was the first to stand, but not by will. She pushed to her feet, the way a sleeper rises to answer a voice spoken from inside their skull. Her face carried the look of someone halfway between trance and command. She took 3 steps toward the mouth of Sea Deep before Marlene caught her wrist. Her pulse was not racing. Her skin was not cold. She was not possessed in any cinematic sense. There was no tremor, no glossed eye, no foam, no alien cadence. She looked disturbingly like a person acting on a memory that did not belong to her body. She whispered, not to Marlene, not to the room, but down into the open shaft. She waited. We made her wait. The pronoun landed wrong. We. As if Carmen spoke from the side of the burying, not the witnessing. As if some ledger beneath the sand had already assigned guilt in plural. Ortiz, still sitting upright on his cot, answered without turning his head. We do it again and it won't stay under. The sentence carried no threat. It sounded like a rule older than the ruin itself. Something subtle then shifted, not in the earth, but in the people. When fear is young, it clings to explanation. When fear ripens, it stops looking for any. No one asked Ortiz how he knew. No one asked Carmen whom she was answering. The refusal to ask was its own confession. They were already behaving as if the logic belonged to the dead. Outside, dawn began without light. The color that came was not morning. It was the gray of a sky that has chosen not to acknowledge a sun at all. No one boiled water. No one unzipped a case. No one wrote a line in the log. Silence took on the texture of protocol. No one said where to go. Yet everyone drifted away from their cots, like people who had rehearsed this ritual in another life. There was no order given, no assignment made, only the precision of a memory with no known origin. Marlene let go of Carmen's wrist, but she didn't step back. Her body remained at the edge of the shaft, not tense, not fighting to turn away, as if that spot had been her natural position long before she was born. Ortiz took off his cap and set it on the floor slowly. There was no reverence in the gesture, no religion, only an acknowledgement. It was time to continue something that did not belong to the living. No one went out to check the weather. No one raised the antenna to call base. No one suggested sealing Sea Deep again. Avoidance had died sometime in the night. Then Alexei spoke, dry, flat, as though reading from a note that had existed long before his voice found it. We opened the wrong layer. Last time, not the first tier, the second. What was left there wasn't remains. No one contradicted him. No one asked for proof. No one made the face people make when something sounds impossible. They listened the way people listen when they are being reminded of something they already knew, but chose to forget. Carmen was still staring into the shaft, eyelids unblinking, her mouth parted just enough for breath to fall downward. She still hears. She never slept. From the corner, someone, maybe Miller, hard to tell in the gray, let slip a sentence, thin as a relic fear. "Night isn't over," Ortiz answered immediately, this time turning fully toward the shaft, speaking not to the living, but to whatever was beneath them. "Night doesn't end until she's returned." No one asked, returned what? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like a memory being reactivated in all of them at once, shared without words. Outside, the wind moved for the first time. Not loud, not violent, just enough to sound like something under the sand was shifting its weight. No one approached the control table. No one touched a switch. No one dared to look at one another. One by one, every last one, they fixed their eyes on the open mouth of the shaft, as if watching was a condition required for whatever lived beneath to stay awake. No one blinked for a long time. The shaft did not breathe, did not exhale heat or odor or sound, but it imposed attention the way some courtroom imposes silence, not by threat, but by a knowledge older than threat. Then, almost imperceptibly, a new fact entered the room. They were all standing. None of them remembered getting up from their cots, from the crates, from the floor. They only knew they were upright now, aligned in a slight arc around the mouth of Sea Deep, like pallbearers without a casket. It was Alexei who noticed first. He lifted his hand an inch off his thigh and his fingers began to curl. Not into a fist, not from tension, but in a gesture eerily similar to how a person might reach to receive something that was about to be handed to them. He pulled his hand back like he had touched an invisible stove. "Something is already coming up," he said. "Not someone, something." Ortiz didn't look away from the shaft when he answered, "If it was coming up, we wouldn't still be able to stand." The statement landed in them like a verdict. Whatever lived below did not yet have permission to rise, which meant something worse. The permission was expected to come from them. Then a sound finally entered the air, not from the shaft, not from the earth, but from Marlene. A slow, deliberate weeping without grief. Not a breakdown, not hysteria. A mechanical crying like a body instructed to leak salt and water without involving the mind. She spoke through it, but the voice riding in her throat was not pleading. "She won't surface to be looked at. We have to go down for her to rise." No one questioned the logic, because what she said did not behave like belief. It behaved like remembered law. Carmen, still nearest the shaft, answered in a calm that did not belong to the living. "We owe the return. We owe it in the direction it was taken. Ortiz closed his eyes for the first time since the knock on the lid hours earlier. Not to pray, not to gather strength, but in the way a man closes his eyes when the sentence has already been read and signed. Outside, the sky remained gray. Not dim, not late. Gray like the world had chosen to suspend the concept of day until the debt beneath was satisfied. No one moved toward the rope ladder, but every spine in the room had already accepted descent, as if the body consents long before the feet begin. No one touched the ladder, but the decision to descend had already formed in their bodies, the way a storm forms in pressure, silently, but past the point of reversal. Marlene broke the standoff first, not by moving, but by asking, "If we go down, who goes first?" No one answered, not because of fear, because the question wasn't truly a question. It functioned like a ritual key. Before something begins, someone must name it aloud. Carmen turned to Ortiz. That look did not plead, did not consult. It confirmed. Like a compact older than their acquaintance, suddenly reactivated. Ortiz drew a breath, not deep, not shaky. The kind of breath taken before carrying out an assignment already known. "I'll go first." No one stopped him. Alexei spoke one single line, the only sentence in his life not said to persuade anyone, but to acknowledge the current reality. "We're not going down to rescue. We're going down to replace." The moment he said it, the temperature shifted as though someone had opened a vault of winter beneath the floor. No draft, but cold rose out of sea deep like mist coming out of a throat still wet below. Marlene's voice arrived before he could tame it. "Before anyone steps down, we need to know what rightful repayment means." Carmen answered immediately, with no thinking required. "One comes up for everyone that goes down." The air clenched at that, like a heart pinched in a fist. Ortiz frowned. "If she comes up one." Carmen finished for him calmly. "Then one of us doesn't come back." No one objected, because no one in that room was a witness anymore. They had all been quietly reassigned as eligible replacements. Marlene nodded slowly. "If one of us is not coming back, that person is chosen before we descend." That was not a proposal. It was a requirement of the right. No randomness. No, "we'll see." Debt has to be named before it is paid. Alexei voiced the question for the room. "Then how is the person chosen?" Carmen did not turn. Her eyes stayed fixed on the shaft. "We don't choose." The silence that followed was not a thinking silence. It was the silence of people who understood that the answer had already been rendered in a jurisdiction no longer belonging to the living. Then, for the first time that night, a smell climbed out of the shaft. Not rot, not decay, not embalming resin. It was the smell of air that had once been exhaled in fear, the kind that only exists when lungs expel their final breath, knowing they will not draw another. And that smell communicated one fact. She would not wait for a third night. The rite had to begin before daylight ended. Ortiz was the first to step onto the ladder. The air around the pit thickened, as if the room itself was holding its breath, being pulled downward with him. The creak of the metal didn't echo. It just sank into the earth, swallowed like a sound dropped into water. No one said, "Go." No one said, "Wait." Those were words that belonged to the world above, and this morning, the sun was not meant to rise. When Ortiz disappeared below the edge, Marlene lifted her head. Her gaze wasn't one of fear. It was the look of someone checking a ritual, ensuring every piece remained where it should, just as it had the last time it was performed. Carmen still stood closest, her shadow spilling over the rim of the pit, stretching down into the place where light no longer reached. Then came Alexei's turn. He didn't take a deep breath, he only spoke, as if reciting a line from a text they'd all memorized long ago. No one goes after, someone continues.
And then he vanished, leaving behind a lingering chill, a faint thread binding two worlds together. Marlene didn't cry again. She simply looked at Carmen, a look that needed no words, no language. It was a farewell between those who understood that goodbyes don't happen when you leave, but when you accept that there's nothing left to say. She placed her foot on the ladder, one rung at a time, until her steps blended with the echoes of Ortiz and Alexei below, and then faded. Now, only Carmen remained, alone. She didn't look down. She looked around the room, once a research station, now just a hollow shell of memory. Empty beds, empty tables, a recorder still glowing, but with no one left to press record. Carmen touched the damp wooden edge of the ladder. For a moment, she whispered, not to the pit, not to the living, but to something in between. No one's taken away. We just change places. Then she climbed down, steady, deliberate, as if that descent was the only way home. Above, the room stayed still. No sound, only a notebook left open on the table, its final line half-written in trembling ink. The ritual begins, and this time, no one objects. Wind slipped through the hatch, carrying gray dust that lifted, turned once in the air, then settled back exactly where it came from, as though time had tested emotion and then froze again. When the clock's hand reached 12, a faint light crept in through the steel door. Not real light, but a reflection from somewhere far below, where those who descended no longer sent signals back. The light shimmered, pale, silvery gray, cold and damp, a light that didn't know whether it belonged to day or night. Sea Deep closed on its own, without a lock, and the world above went on, pretending no one had ever gone beneath it.